She was 6 months pregnant, dressed beautifully, sitting at a table she had every right to sit at, and a man walked up to her, slowly, deliberately, and said things so ugly, so cruel, that the entire restaurant went silent. He called her names. He questioned her baby. He told her to leave. And then, when she didn't flinch, when she didn't break, he grabbed a pitcher of ice water and threw it, right in her face, in front of everyone. And as she stood there, soaking wet, 8 months along, water dripping from her chin, she looked at him and said quietly, "You have absolutely no idea what you just done." He laughed. He actually laughed. And that laugh, that was the last confident thing Tyler ever did in his life. Stay with me, because what happened next took less than 30 minutes and destroyed everything he thought he had. I want to tell you a story about a woman named Diane, a woman who walked into a beautiful restaurant on one of the most important nights of her life, wearing her best dress, carrying her unborn child, and holding her head high. She didn't know what was coming. None of us ever do. The place was called the Cornerstone. It sat right in the heart of New Orleans, Louisiana, and it had been there since 1950. Not just as a restaurant, as a landmark, a symbol, the kind of place that held history in its walls and memory in its floorboards. If you look closely at the photographs lining the entrance, you could see black families seated at those tables during a time when they couldn't eat almost anywhere else in the city. You could see civil rights leaders sharing meals between meetings. You could see generations of struggle and pride captured in faded black and white. The Cornerstone wasn't just a place to eat. It was proof that black Americans had built something lasting, something beautiful, something no one could take away. Diane walked in on a Friday evening in late October. She was 6 months pregnant, her belly round and full beneath a flowing silk dress the color of deep burgundy. She moved with the kind of calm confidence that only comes from a woman who knows exactly who she is. She greeted the hostess warmly, a young woman named Tanya, who smiled right back, and was guided to the corner table by the window. Their table, the same spot where her husband, James, had proposed her 5 years ago almost to the day. She settled into the plush chair and let out a slow, happy breath. She pulled out her phone and texted her sister. Same table where everything started. 5 years. Can't believe it. James was upstairs. The Cornerstone wasn't just a restaurant. It was a jewel of a much larger family business. James Crawford was the chairman and CEO of Crawford Hospitality Group, a company that owned 67 restaurants, hotels, and event spaces across the South. His grandfather, Walter Crawford, had opened the Cornerstone with his bare hands in 1950 after being turned away from every fine dining establishment in New Orleans. Tonight, James was wrapping up a board meeting on the upper floor. He had texted Diane that he'd be down by 8. She told him not to rush. She had no way of knowing that a man named Tyler was watching her from across the dining room with something ugly in his eyes. Tyler had been working at the Cornerstone for just under 3 months. He was 24 years old, and from his very first day, something about the clientele had bothered him. He'd grown up in a bubble, the kind of suburb where everyone looked the same, and anything different felt like a threat. He'd made comments, little ones at first, then louder, to the other servers, to the kitchen staff, anyone who would listen. "This used to be a classy place," he'd muttered to his co-worker, a young woman named April, just a week before. "I don't understand why they keep letting certain people in." April had looked at him with something close to disgust, but she hadn't reported it. Not yet. And the manager, a woman named Linda Carter, had heard whispers about Tyler's attitude. She'd been told twice. Once by April, once by a long-serving waiter named Clarence who had worked at the Cornerstone for 18 years. Both times, Linda looked uncomfortable, shuffled some papers, and said something vague about personality differences and not wanting to jump to conclusions. She was the kind of person who called herself open-minded, but found it very hard to act that way when it cost her something. So Tyler had kept going. And tonight, seeing Diane sitting at the best table in the house, glowing, elegant, clearly at home, something inside him snapped. He walked over slowly, deliberately, the way someone walks when they want you to know they're in control. "Well," he said, stopping right beside her chair with his arms crossed, "aren't you in the wrong part of town?" Diane looked up from her phone. She didn't flinch. "Excuse me? You heard me?" His voice was low, but sharp enough to carry to nearby tables. "I don't know how you got past the hostess, but this place has a certain standard. Maybe somewhere else would suit you better." The table next to her went quiet. A businessman 3 booths down slowly reached for his phone. Diane set her own phone face down on the table. Her voice was steady, smooth as still water. "I have a reservation. My name is Diane Crawford. I'm waiting for my husband." Tyler let out a short, cruel laugh. "Right. Sure you are." He leaned a little closer. "Let me guess. He's parking the car? Or maybe he's not coming at all." "Please step away from my table," Diane said. He didn't move. Instead, he got louder. Louder in a room that was now going very, very quiet. He said things I won't repeat in full, but they were ugly and they were meant to hurt. He questioned where she came from. He made comments about her dress, about her baby, about what kind of man she must be married to. Every word was a small stone thrown at something precious. And through all of it, Diane sat still. Her hand moved to her belly, a quiet, protective gesture. Her eyes stayed clear. That's the thing about a woman with real dignity. You can throw ugliness at her, and it doesn't stick. It just shows everyone in the room what you are. People often ask, why didn't she just leave? Why didn't she call someone? Why didn't she make a scene right away? I think about that question a lot. Because the truth is, Diane was doing what black women have been trained to do their whole lives. Stay calm. Don't escalate. Don't give them a reason to make it worse. She was trying to protect herself, her baby, and the dignity of that moment. She was hoping that someone, a manager, another server, anyone, would step in and make it stop. But no one came. And Tyler, feeding on the silence, grew bolder. The businessman recording from his booth, a man named Gerald, who was in New Orleans on a business trip, had already captured several minutes of footage. His hand was shaking slightly. He'd seen a lot in his years of travel, but this was something else. He stood up. "Hey," he said firmly, "that's enough. You need to back away from that table right now." Tyler turned to look at him. "Mind your business. This is a staff matter." "You're harassing a pregnant woman in a public restaurant," Gerald said. "That's everybody's business." Tyler turned back to Diane, who had calmly reached for her water glass. Just tried to take one slow sip to hold herself together. That simple, human gesture, reaching for a glass of water, was what pushed Tyler over the edge. "Oh, what's that?" he sneered. "You would throw that at me?" "I'm trying to drink my water," Diane said quietly. "Please, just leave me alone." But he didn't. Before Gerald could take another step, before Tanya the hostess could reach the table, before anyone in that room could react, Tyler grabbed a large water pitcher from the serving station behind him, lifted it above his head, and threw the entire thing directly at Diane's face. The room gasped. Someone screamed. Ice water exploded across Diane's face and hair and dress, splashing onto the marble floor. The crystal pitcher shattered as it hit the ground. The sound was sharp and violent and wrong. For one long second, the entire restaurant was frozen. Then Diane stood up. She was soaking wet. Her beautiful dress clung to her, dark with water. Ice cubes lay scattered across the table. She wiped her face slowly with one steady hand. And when she opened her eyes, there was no panic in them. There was something far more powerful than panic. "You have no idea," she said quietly, "what you've just done." Tyler still looked smug, breathing hard, chest puffed out, like a man who had won something. He had no idea he'd just lit a match in a room full of everything he was about to lose. Linda Carter finally appeared, radio in hand, face white as a sheet. She took in the shattered glass. The soak woman. The phones pointed from every direction. She did the math. Badly. "Let's all take a breath," Linda said carefully. "I'm sure this is some kind of misunderstanding." Diane turned to her slowly. "Your employee just threw water in the face of a pregnant woman and called her names I will not repeat in this room. And you are calling it a misunderstanding." "I meant every word," Tyler said, looking proud of himself. Someone had to say it. Linda shot him a warning look. But the words were already out, already recorded, already uploading to the internet from Gerald's phone. Diane pulled out her own phone and made one call. Her voice was calm, the way a storm is calm before it's right on top of you. "James, I need you downstairs. Now." "What's wrong?" His voice sharpened instantly. "Someone threw water in my face. In our restaurant. Please come down." There was a silence. Then his voice came back, quiet and deliberate. "I'm on my way." Tyler heard the words, "our restaurant," and laughed under his breath. He turned to April and whispered something she'd later repeat to investigators. "Here comes the cavalry. Probably some guy in a do-rag who thinks owning a used car makes him important." April stared at him. She didn't laugh. Upstairs, James Crawford closed his leather portfolio, excused himself from the board meeting, and stepped into the private elevator. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with the kind of quiet authority that doesn't need to announce itself. He wore a dark suit he'd had tailored in Atlanta. He had a Rolex that had belonged to his grandfather, Walter. And as the elevator descended, his jaw was set in a way that the people who knew him well would have recognized immediately as controlled fury. The doors opened into the dining room, and everything changed. Several senior staff members immediately stood straighter. The maitre d' moved toward him. The room, already tense and buzzing, shifted in that way rooms shift when someone important walks in and people slowly realize it. Tyler didn't realize it. Not yet. He was still standing near Diane's table, arms crossed, looking satisfied with himself, when he felt a presence beside him. "Excuse me." The voice was low and perfectly calm. Tyler turned around, ready to send another customer away, and found himself looking at a man whose expression made him feel, for the very first time that evening, like something had gone wrong. "My name," the man said, "is James Crawford, and I think we need to talk. I've thought a lot about what it means when someone's whole world collapses in a single moment, not a slow crumbling, a sudden total collapse, the kind where you can actually watch it happen on a person's face. That's what happened to Tyler." James didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He spoke clearly and without rushing, the way a person speaks when they are completely sure of what they know. "Do you see that photograph?" James gestured to a large framed image on the wall. 3 generations of black men in their Sunday best, standing in front of the Cornerstone's original brick facade. The year written in white ink at the bottom, 1950. Tyler glanced at it. "What about it?" "That is my grandfather, Walter Crawford. He built this restaurant because there wasn't a single fine dining establishment in this city that would serve a black man with dignity. He built it with his savings and his hands and his faith. The man beside him is my father, Raymond Crawford. The boy at the end is me, on the day I was old enough to officially join the family business." Tyler's face changed. The smugness began to drain. "I am the chairman and CEO of Crawford Hospitality Group." James continued. "We operate 67 properties across 7 states. This restaurant, the one whose floors you're standing on, the one whose paychecks have been funding your rent for 3 months, belongs to my family. It has always belonged to my family." The dining room was utterly silent. Not even silverware clinked. "And the woman you just assaulted," James said, his voice dropping even lower, "is my wife. She is carrying my child. She was sitting at the table where I proposed to her 5 years ago. Tonight was our anniversary dinner." Tyler's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Linda Carter had gone the color of old paper. She understood now, fully and horribly, the magnitude of what she had allowed to happen. James turned to address the whole room. He spoke clearly, his voice full of something that wasn't just anger. It was grief and love and the weight of history. "I want everyone in this room to hear me. This restaurant was built as a refuge. When black families had nowhere else in the city to sit down and share a meal with dignity, they came here. When leaders of the civil rights movement needed somewhere to plan and rest and breathe, they sat at these very tables. That is not decoration on the walls. That is the reason this place exists." He paused. His eyes moved to the wall of photographs, and for just a moment his expression softened with something private and deep. "Tonight, an employee of this restaurant used that history as a backdrop for hatred. He called my wife names. He told her she didn't belong here. and then he threw water in her face. James looked back at Tyler. I want you to think very carefully about what it means to do that in a building your grandfather's money helped build. Tyler looked like a man who wanted to disappear through the floor. Security escorted him out through the kitchen. He didn't say a word on the way out. Then James turned to Linda. The investigation that followed was swift and damning. Staff members came forward one after another. April, Clarence, two others who had been afraid to speak before. They described 7 formal complaints ignored, 3 incidents where Tyler had refused to serve black customers or made life difficult for them, a pattern that Linda had seen and decided not to see. You knew, James said simply. You chose to look the other way because confronting it was uncomfortable. And because of that choice, my pregnant wife was assaulted in my own restaurant on our wedding anniversary. Linda was suspended immediately. She would later face a civil rights complaint that changed the course of her career. Diane, who had been sitting quietly in a dry jacket someone had brought her, stood and addressed the room one last time. Her voice was soft, but the whole room leaned in to hear it. What happened to me tonight happens to women every single day, in restaurants and hotels and offices and stores. The difference is that tonight there were cameras. Tonight there are consequences. But every woman who's ever been made to feel like she didn't belong, in a place she had every right to be, deserves those same consequences for the people who hurt her, not just the ones who are lucky enough to be married to the owner. She paused, her hand resting gently on her belly. I want my daughter to grow up in a world where her worth is never questioned because of the color of her skin. I don't know if we'll get there in her lifetime, but I know we have to keep trying. The applause started with Clarence. Then it spread. Staff, diners, even a few people who had originally looked away during Tyler's tirade. It filled the room like something released. The Cornerstone closed for 1 week. Every staff member was retrained. New reporting procedures were put in place. A community oversight board was established. And Gerald's video, that shaky, honest 6-minute recording, was shared millions of times across the country, sparking conversations about dignity and accountability that reached far beyond one restaurant in New Orleans. 6 months later, James and Diane came back to the Cornerstone on a Sunday afternoon. Their daughter, a tiny, bright-eyed girl they named Lily, slept in her carrier against Diane's chest. They sat at their corner table by the window. Clarence brought them sweet tea, without being asked. The room hummed with families of every background sharing meals in peace. Diane looked up at Walter Crawford's photograph on the wall, the young man with the proud eyes who had built all of this when the world told him he couldn't. She's going to know this story, she said quietly. James looked at his wife, then at his daughter. She already does, he said. It's in her bones. That's where I want to leave you. Not with the ugliness of what Tyler did. Not with the failure of a manager who chose comfort over courage. But with a woman sitting in a restaurant her family built, holding her daughter, surrounded by people who finally did the right thing. The truth is, dignity was never something Diane had to earn. She walked in with it. She left with it. And no amount of cruelty was ever going to take it from her. If this story moved you, share it. Because the world gets better one moment of accountability at a time. And we could all use a few more of those moments. And that, my friends, is the story of Diane Crawford. A woman who walked into a room and was told she didn't belong. By someone who had no idea that room was built by her family's hands. Remember her name. Remember this story. And the next time someone tries to make you feel small, remember that dignity is something no one can throw water on. If this story meant something to you, please like this video and share it with someone who needs a little reminder of their own worth today. Subscribe to this channel and come back every week, because I have so many more stories like this one waiting for you. Stories of strength, stories of justice, stories that remind us all of what really matters. I'll see you right back here very soon. Take care of yourselves.